The Indianapolis City Council is planning to raise your taxes and my taxes to pay for new infrastructure. That's pretty cool. We love new infrastructure, but everything's so expensive. It's really hard to get by on a regular basis, and more taxes sucks. So why are they doing it, and are there other options? I want to talk about the plan that the City Council has, the plan that the mayor has, all the details, and give you all the information that I have. Where did this whole idea come from? There are two bills that were passed in 2025 and 2026. The first one is House Enrolled Act 1461. That came into effect July 1st, 2025. This created a $50 million matching program. So if Marion County provides $50 million, then the state will also provide $50 million. It also raised the fee cap for Marion County, specifically the wheel tax and the surtax cap. Originally, it was $80.50. Now it's $240 and up to $150. So pretty interesting. Proposal 192, which is what we're talking about here, that would raise the tax, sets that at a flat $100, so not the maximum. I'll explain all those details a little bit later. Senate Enrolled Act, this happened a year later, July 1st, 2026. This is a change to the matching structure and some of the enforcement. Number one, it provides an escalating match structure. So we get $50 million each year, but the requirements increase. We have to do $50 million the first, $70 the second, $80, $90, then $100 million going forward from 2031 on. We also get all or nothing enforcement, and I do not like this at all. If you miss 1 year, we can't come back and get that. If we're a little short, we don't get less of the match. This is a very, very strict and stringent rule. If we lose eligibility, we lose it forever. So I understand this wheel tax is really saying two things. The House said, hey, Marion County, you need to increase your surtax and your wheel tax, and we will provide you a reward in $50 million of road funding, which is great. I see the Senate's bill as being a little bit more aggressive. It says we're going to make this a little harder for Indianapolis. We don't really want them to achieve this goal. We want them to just collect more revenue on people from Indy. I don't think that's great, but this is what they're decided to do. There are a few nitty-gritty but really important details that I think we should consider. First, the $50 million match must be in new revenue. It can't be revenue that's already established for something else, as far as we understand. We also can't use public safety funds. So for instance, the police are funded for about 1,700 police officers, but have something like 1,400 police officers. We can't take that extra money and put it towards the road fund. That wouldn't be considered new revenue. It also would be coming from public safety, which is not allowed. Number two, no existing transportation funds. So they can't take money from other transportation projects and put this in to match that new $50 million requirement. New revenue requirement weakens every year. So the first year we have to have $50 million, 100% of that needs to be new revenue. $70 million the next only needs like 10 to 20% of new revenue. I forgot to write out all the details, but they're not that important, and you can do some of your own research if you really want to know all the little details. So let's talk about some potential options on ways that we can do this, and we'll actually dig into a few more that are presented by the City Council. We could raise property taxes, which is really unlikely. One, it's very, very unpopular, but it's also not money that's dedicated to roads, and the caps from SEA 1, Senate Enrolled Act 1, that happened last year, does cap that percentage, 1% for homesteads, 2% for other residential, 3% for commercial. We could also look at the state income tax. Our income tax is paid where we live, not where we work. So even if we raise the income tax, it could be used for other things than roads, and it's just going to affect the people in Marion County the most. So not really the best. So the thing about Indianapolis is we're a big shipping hub. We're the crossroads of America, and Indianapolis specifically is the crossroads of Indiana. So that means that we're not really getting all of the money from people who are using our roads, just people who live in this county. We also can't do budget reallocation. We can't do bonds, federal grants. Those aren't new revenue. So the mechanism that the House basically pushed on us, raising the wheel tax and the surtax, is what the council is going with as their plan. There are three documents. There's the press release, there's the proposal text, and then there's the presentation about Proposal 192. This is all the information that is relevant to this. Obviously, those bills are also relevant. You can find a lot of this information at the link shown up here. Click on it. There's a link in the comments too, probably, if I did my job right. This is Counselor Andy Nielsen, who is a big proponent and the one presenting on Proposal 192 at the City Council meeting that I attended. This is the Council's current plan. And I believe Andy Nielsen is kind of the author in some ways. I know that there's other co-authors, so I think he's kind of the big proponent and the activist behind this proposal. The proposal kind of starts out talking about how our roads are funded. It's really, first of all, super complex. This chart on the right side that I have written over deserves a lot more focus. Those are all the details on how the roads are actually funded. But on the left side, we have a little example of how we focus on center lane miles, not total lane miles. So for instance, a 2-lane road that's a mile long has 2 lane miles. So those are 2 lanes with each a mile. A 6-lane road would still be considered 2 lane miles under the current plan because they're looking at center lane miles, not 6 lane miles. For instance, Keystone, which has a ton of lane miles, is considered something a lot smaller than it really is. It doesn't take into account all the wear and tear and all the other random problems that come with that. So something to keep in mind that this is a bit of an issue in the way that we fund our roads and something that the local government can't change. So in the presentation that Andy put together, they talk about a couple revenue sources and who has the power to use those revenue sources. And revenue sources that would fit very well for this specific qualification. We got gas tax, tolling, state vehicle fees, we got local user fees like surtaxes. A lot of these, the ones with the red X's, are ones that are controlled by the state that the local government does not have the ability to actually authorize. Some that I thought would be really valuable is the commuter tax. That's not even authorized under state law. We can't have a commuter tax. And then finally, income and property taxes, which we already talked about some of the limits there for this specific type of funding. This is what the proposal actually says. They want to raise the minimum surtax, the just kind of flat surtax, to $100. So every single person pays $100 on the surtax if they have a passenger vehicle, motorcycle, trailer, all that type of stuff, really basic stuff. In the past, it was percentage-based with a minimum. That is changing. Now, you'll notice this is $100, not $150. That is actually the maximum that could be required. This basically comes out to an $80 a month increase for most people, maybe plus or minus a little bit here. You'll also notice from before that the maximum this fee could be set is $150. It's set at $100. So a much better deal than what could potentially be put into law. For heavier vehicles, this is the wheel tax. So this is based on the larger, more wheels, more axles, more weight, things like that. That is maxed out to $240. Originally was like 10 to 40 bucks. That is a pretty huge jump. But this is going to be paid by people who drive semis, RVs, buses, really large vehicles that are doing the biggest amount of damage. Some very important things to note. One vehicle pays one tax. You're not going to pay both. The surtax and rates need to be applied uniformly to all vehicle classes and all vehicle registrants. So if you're a multi-billionaire or a trillionaire driving the most expensive vehicle, you will pay the same amount as a widow who is driving a 2012 Toyota Corolla. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but that is the way that the laws are written in our state. They're not very fair in that sense. There are a couple side effects that could be kind of positive if we think about it. There's going to be additional revenue generated for other municipalities in Marion County. So looking at Lawrence, Beech Grove, Speedway, all those different places, that's about $7.44 million that are going to these other municipalities combined. Obviously distributed differently depending on the size and whatnot. In the document, they also talk about why this matters now. There's 4 main points. There's a use it or lose it grant. That means that if we don't get it, we can't keep it. We're not going to be able to reapply next year. Our aging infrastructure. We have deferred maintenance for a very, very long time in Indianapolis, and we need to take care of our roads. They are really bad. Basic services and funding cuts are a result if our maintenance and our deferred maintenance becomes too large. We may have to cut other funding to repair really critical road infrastructure. That's not good. And finally, this is something that they talked a lot about at the city council meeting, is our credit risk. Rather than going into all of the details on all of the credit agencies, I decided to focus on one. We're talking about Moody's. They base 30% of their rating on long-term liabilities and fixed costs related to revenue. So we make a lot of our revenue from roads. We make a lot of money from you driving to and from places, spending money on things, registering your vehicle. When you go out to eat, you pay a sales tax. When you go shopping, you pay a sales tax. When you go to the gas pump, except for the last couple of months, you pay a sales tax. If we repair our roads today, our long-term liabilities go down because we know that our maintenance is very, very low for the next couple of years until things get worn out. There are also fixed costs related to making sure that these are maintained. So this is about a third-ish of the overall rating that Moody's has. Indianapolis also has less revenue flexibility than other cities. We have a lot of aggressive legislation by our state house that limits what we can do to raise taxes, like a commuter tax. We can't easily increase taxes. We also have some hard caps, the 1%, 2%, and 3% on property taxes that, obviously hedges us in a little bit and makes us a little bit less flexible to credit agencies. If repairing a road costs X amount of dollars today, it's going to cost X plus inflation plus whatever the current economic crisis is. These things are going to change and they're going to affect things long term. So we got to keep in mind that inflation and deterioration have a really big impact on this. Finally, 30% of Moody's rating as well is based on economic opportunity. How are we doing as the GDP of our city? Are we growing? Are we shrinking? Are we keeping people in the city? Bad infrastructure causes businesses to relocate, to move. That's a huge issue and could really cost our rating. So a pretty big percentage is indirectly related to our infrastructure. I think that's really important to keep in mind whenever they say the credit risk is a potential here. In the presentation, they include a year-over-year breakdown of the revenue, so we can see where all this money is coming from. You can see there at the top, the yellow is going to be cumulative growth and budget efficiencies. They don't really go into a lot of details on what these are. That's why I highlighted them in yellow. I would love to know a little bit more about what those are. I just couldn't find all that info, and it was not as relevant right now as looking at the surtax. Now, focusing on the new surtax and wheel tax, we're looking at $71 million a year coming from that wheel and surtax. Obviously, we only need $50 million the first year, 70, 80, 90, 100. A lot of that is coming from the combination of cumulative growth and the wheel tax staying flat and giving enough of a cushion for those future years. The state match, as we can see, it's $50,000 all the way across the board. On the bottom right, it gives us our 5-year total, $855 million in economic investment collected, sources, revenue coming in. And then the uses at the very bottom, that's $855 million spent. So the idea here is that all the money we collect goes directly into roads. It can't be used for other things, which I really enjoy. I would love to see that certified fully by somebody, but I don't know who to call. Obviously, there are more details in the plan. If you really want to read the document, you can find that. But this isn't the only plan that's currently going around. We also have Mayor Hogsett's plan. Hogsett's plan from the beginning has been no new taxes. He didn't want any new taxes. The council says this is not a new tax, this is just an increase. He's got a different plan. He's going to take $10 million from 2026, 10 from 27, $5 million from stormwater fees, and $25 million allocated through a 2027 spring fiscal ordinance. A quote from a lovely article by Enrique Saenz, or Science. I don't really know how to pronounce it, so I'm sorry if I messed that up, from Mirror Indy. Quote says, in future years, the city will use funding from budget efficiencies and growth to meet the additional required matching dollars. The article gives more details on that. The biggest problem with Mayor Hogsett's plan is this maybe doesn't address the new revenue requirements. I have my own concerns, which we'll dig into here. When I started researching this and got a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole, I started to wonder how the comptroller, who actually certifies all of this, would see this specific plan, which obviously doesn't go into effect until January 1st, 2027, but all of the certification has to be submitted by December 31st, 2026. So a lot of this stuff needs to be sorted. Are they worried about where that money's coming from? What are the details of it? So I emailed them and actually got a reply back from Jess Nahad. I think I'm pronouncing that some way. I hope that that's moderately accurate. SCA 179 requires Marion County to certify that it can provide the match, but it does not define what the match must consist of or require that the revenue already be collected. So the comptroller itself is not going to say, hey, is this technically new revenue? They're just going to certify that they have said that it is available and that they have a plan to collect that information. So the comptroller does say this: we regularly collaborate with INDOT, which handles match requirements for transportation-related programs. In practice, the comptroller office receives the notice and then coordinates with INDOT to confirm if this is considered new funds, if this matches the requirements for the law. So, because they didn't give me as much clarification as I wanted, I emailed INDOT, and hopefully I will be able to update you on what INDOT says. Maybe it will happen in the middle of me filming this video. I don't even know. We'll find out. But it's not just problems with the comptroller that I see. There's some personal problems that I have. I've labeled these as my thoughts and prayers. Here's some ideas. This hurts the working class and poor people more than other people. I don't think that's great. Owning a car is essentially a requirement to live in Indianapolis for most working class people. There are some people who are able to get by without a car, but most can't. And most jobs require some form of transportation that is more flexible than what our current public transit allows. My other issue too is municipalities pay in, but they don't get the matching benefits. How do they feel about this? Should they be getting an equivalent match for the amount of money that they're having to, collect and increase? My big complaint though is commuters don't have to pay. And I know that the city council can't do anything about that, but I wish that there was a way to petition the state for that to change. I think a commuter tax makes a lot of sense on where we are, the specialness of this specific city inside of this county, inside of this state. Also, what councilors are undecided? Because the way that this is probably going to go is that they will approve this plan. The mayor will veto it and say he wants to use his plan. And then the council has to overturn the mayor's veto. That requires more people than it requires to pass the original proposal. Who is currently on the fence and what are their problems? I'd really like to know that. The proposal also says that it's for curb repairs, sidewalks, streets, and roads, but the law says that they can't use it on greenways, bike lanes, bike trails, or sidewalks. How are we going to make sure that we don't break the law while doing this? There is no sunset date, which means that this is going to go on for forever. That means that if the original matching grant disappears, we are going to continue to pay as if we are getting that matching grant. Should this have a sunset date? Should this come to an end? Should that be tied to the match grant? I think that would make a lot of sense. And then finally, this is just kind of a fun anecdotal one that I could think of. When people find out how much it's going to cost to register their vehicle next year, they might just not register their vehicle. There's a lot of people that just won't. When those fees come in from the police, how is that getting allocated to this budget? Because we know that delinquency is going to increase because the cost has increased, and the alternative is to get a ticket. Where does that money go? Does it go back into the budget? I think it should. Maybe that should be something as part of this proposal. But for me, if I was going to pick one really big pet peeve and one request personally to ask the city council, it would be this. I want them to petition the state for a tax credit for people making less than $33,000 a year who live in Marion County. I think a petition like this would be really, really impactful on people's lives. Yes, they do have to pay it, but the fact that they are getting a tax credit at the end, we understand that the roads in Indianapolis, Marion County, aren't being only used by people in Marion County. We don't have a lot of insular drivers. We have a lot of people who commute in and out of the county, and I think that that should be taken into account. Our lowest paid citizens shouldn't have to pay for the improvements that are being ruined by people who don't even live in the county. I think that makes a lot of sense. That's my request if it passes. I know that there's something that I missed in here. I know there's something that I haven't thought of. I have been thinking about this for a couple weeks, but you probably will watch this and go, I think about this or I think about that. Leave a comment below. I would love to understand a little bit more on how we can actually solve this complex problem. We have terrible roads, terrible potholes. My car is already messed up. I got to get my tire repaired and probably some of my suspension repaired. I don't know when, soon, probably sooner rather than later. And if I could ensure that I don't have potholes, I would really love that. But this extra $100 a year will suck. It will eat away at some people's income a lot worse than others. So How do we solve the problem? Do we move forward? I don't know. I'd love to hear your opinion. If you liked watching, please leave me a like, leave me a comment. If you're watching in the background while you're doing something else, I appreciate that too. I'm happy to be background noise for you. If you want to support me, you can find me on Venmo. You can find me on Instagram. I'm pretty much mffred everywhere. And on Substack, I'm mffred.substack.com. Give me a follow, give me a subscription. There are free and paid tiers. I appreciate you all watching. I hope this was informative for you and gave you a little bit more to think about and understand in our city. I'll talk to you all later. Peace.